This winter I built my dream violin studio. The studio had to accommodate in-person, safe lessons, as well as Zoom lessons, and it needed to serve as a special recording studio where I could review and edit footage from those lessons. Let me show you around. The studio is 8 feet by 10 feet with a sloped ceiling, 8 feet on one side and 7 feet on the other. We wanted to keep the whole footprint of the studio underneath 100 square foot. That meant that we didn't have to apply for a building permit, but it also allowed for enough space for us to keep distance from each other while in the lesson. We use a combination of new and reclaimed material for the construction. We got a lot of the lumber and hardware from our local home improvement store, but we were also able to find windows, doors, and a lot of small things from our local reuse center. Got all of it secondhand. One thing that was really important to me was having a ramp that went into the entrance of the studio. It can be very slippery, snowy in upstate New York in the winters. I wanted to make sure my students had access to that door. When the students walk in, they have a coat area immediately to their left. There are 2 coat hangers, one up high and one down low, just for them. There's also a cookie sheet right on the ground where you can safely remove boots and snowy shoes. Just to the right of that is a white chair, child size. If the child coming to the lesson doesn't have another sibling in tow, then they can go ahead and unpack on that white chair, set their violin case there, and leave it there for the duration of the lesson. If there is another child there, then we borrow that chair and they can sit in it for the lesson. The studio is built to accommodate that Suzuki triangle pattern. The teacher has a chair, the parent has a chair, and the child has a hand-woven rug to stand on the floor. Now, many of them also have foot charts, which they just roll out and place right on top of the carpet and stand on that. Immediately to my right, from where I'm sitting in the teaching chair, I have the Husky toolbox system. There are 4 drawers, maximum depth 4 inches, minimum depth 2 inches. I love having those right next to me. I can pull them out one at a time, and each drawer houses a different category of supplies I might need during the lesson. So the very top drawer has all of the teaching knickknacks and gadgets I would use, such as dice or a bell, something I could hang from the student's scroll. Next, down in the second drawer, I have my Suzuki books, other supplemental materials such as scale and etude books. In the third drawer, I have a set of technology and camera gear, so different stands for my iPhone, the cameras themselves, tripods, accessories and cables. And the bottom final drawer is just purely a storage drawer. It's nice to be able to keep all of the clutter out of the visual space of the student, so they're looking at only very intentionally hand-picked items while the rest of my belongings are tucked away. Now directly above the Husky Toolbox system are 3 shelves. On those shelves are incredibly intentional, purposeful items that are very special to me. On the bottom shelf is a particular incense that I've come to love. I think it's really important for teachers to think about the whole environment that the child is walking into. So not just how large the space is or where the teacher is sitting, but what the lighting is like, what the smells are like, what the temperature is like. Incense is a way for me to set the tone. I would never have it lit and smoking while the child is here. But for them to have a common scent that they come to recognize every time they walk into the studio, that can be very, very impactful at a deep level. On the second shelf, my partner keeps her yoga mat and yoga blocks. We share this space. We built it also for her to have a yoga studio, a practice temple, so to speak, outside of our own home. So that's her shelf, and she was a complete collaborator in the building process. I appreciated her help in every step of the way. On the top shelf, we both have our shared book collection, sort of library of inspiration. You'll find there a collection of yoga books as well as Zen books and teaching and learning books. Of course, a copy of Nurtured by Love is up there on the top shelf. Across the whole back of the studio is a reclaimed piece of hardwood. It stretches from one side to the other, freestanding, nothing underneath it. That piece of wood serves as the desk. It's 34 inches up from the ground, which is plenty enough room with the tall monitor and the webcam above for me to use it as a standing desk. So in all of my Zoom lessons, I actually stand for the lesson. I don't have to do any sort of transition from sitting to standing. I think it also helps my posture in the long hours of teaching online. Now the technology side of the Zoom setup, which rests on top of that piece of hardwood, consists of the Mac Mini with the M1 chip. That's connected up to a simple HD 27-inch monitor, which sits on a Wally stand, W-A-L-I stand. We have a Apple keyboard in space gray and a Logitech Master 3 mouse. We also have a HyperX Quadcast microphone, the USB microphone for simplicity, that goes along with the Logitech webcam. I could, in the future, add a few extra arms onto that Wally monitor stand and film straight from my camera, or even add another microphone setup or a lighting setup above it. Right now, this is a simplified setup that just always stays there, ready for me to start the lesson as soon as I walk in. Heating the space, we have an electric heater, ENVI heater. It's rated to heat a 200 square foot space. This only being 80 square feet, that's plenty enough heat for this space. My favorite part about that high efficiency electric heater is that it doesn't make any sound. So I can have my USB mic on original sound in Zoom, and I'm not affected at all by the sound of that heater keeping the space warm. So I didn't just want a space to teach lessons in, virtual or otherwise. I wanted a space to record lessons. Since college, I've been dragging around my iPhone, my computer, whatever system I could cheaply use to record the lessons that I was giving. My idea going into this studio build was that the better quality my recording, then the more closely I could watch myself teach, edit, review that footage, put it together, and then be more in contact with who I am as a teacher and to view myself outside as an observer, to really make evaluative judgments of how my teaching was. Now, of course, also if you're looking at the certificate of achievement or the application to become a teacher trainer, having footage of you teaching violin is very important. And so that's at the back of my mind. How can I set up a space so that in the future, down the road, I would be able to use the footage coming from this space? I went ahead and invested in some important technological upgrades for myself, up from just my standard iPhone or my MacBook Air. And I want to talk through a few of those, perhaps your entry level for setting up your own recording ecosystem, something that you could easily set up to record your own lessons. So the first thing that I looked into was cameras. So I had a couple of different criteria. And first, it had to be great for video, because that's what I'm primarily doing. Second, it had to be within a family or ecosystem of cameras that I could continue to upgrade. As I was able to invest more in the quality of camera, I would already know the system that I was working with. I also wanted it to be easy to use during the lesson. So if I'm teaching violin, I can't turn around and mess with the camera or go walk behind it and look to make sure that it's focused correctly, etc. So I ended up going with the Canon family, and I chose the EOS M50 as my camera of choice. Now this has a couple of great features. One is the dual picture autofocus. So if I have two things up here, it's going to track both of what I'm doing. I happen to be recording on this camera right now. Now, I have a flip out screen next to me, next to the camera, so I can actually watch myself while I'm recording. If I'm in the lesson, I can look over and check the framing. Is the student in the lesson shot or not? I can zoom in and out on the fly relatively easily. And it'll really beautifully track what's going on in the lesson. So if the student moves around in the lesson, the camera will track it. I love this little EOS M50, a lot of power packaged into a very compact mirrorless camera. To go with that for audio, I wanted to find something that could record from the whole room. I didn't want to have to lob up a parent or a child when they came into the lesson with me, so I went with a Zoom H5. It's also what I'm recording on right now, so the audio quality that you are hearing is the quality of that Zoom H5. Now I can set the levels for the H5 before I get started with my max violin output, but it also is still strong enough to pick up my voice. I can mount that above on the ceiling, or I can set it to the side of me or even in the center of the room amidst the parent-teacher-student triangle. The Zoom H5, another reason that I got it is that it has XLR inputs. So further down the road, if I decide to get an instrument mic or perhaps a shotgun mic or a Shure microphone for voice, that I could hook in a couple of different inputs into that Zoom system, and it would still be a handy on-the-go recording device. So in order to get a few angles for the lesson, which I was really interested in, I invested in a strong webcam. So when I do my Zoom lessons, I have an HD 1080p webcam, which is nice for Zoom, but I can also rotate that monitor with the webcam above it to be able to get a full shot of the room. So while I have my Canon M50 shooting me and the student, I can also have from a side angle that webcam saving directly onto the computer, shooting me from that angle. And then for an entire room cam view, I have my iPhone along with a iPhone adapter that can go on a tripod. That can be boosted up quite tall in the corner of the room, and I can see everything from my computer over to my teaching chair, the child in the middle, and even the facial expression or the action or gesture of the parent. So I feel like with those three angles, I'm capturing a very clear picture of the room, and even from my teaching perspective, everything that I would be noticing in the lesson. I wasn't really aware before I started this project how setting up the studio so intentionally with exactly what I imagined, every single detail specified, how much that would actually change and improve my teaching. So going from teaching in a tiny house with my partner on our couch into my laptop to teaching with this setup, with the set-aside in-room computer, the monitor, the USB microphone, the whole Husky toolbox, the lighting, the incense, the hardwood floors, everything. This has totally changed the way that I mentally approach the lesson. I'm calm, confident, collected. I know where all of my tools are. I know that my technology is going to work. I can trust that system. And I have amazing photo quality, catching all of it. The most important thing that I would say, though, is that at the end of the day, I power off the computer. I turn off the lights. I pack away my instrument, and I walk out. I shut that door and I walk into a different space. I walk back home. I know many teachers have their studio set up in their own home, and honestly, mine is only a few steps out the front door. But having them in two different spaces, having only my violin teaching things in this space and all of my other living stuff in my other space, has made all the difference. It's allowed me to walk back the next day fresher, sharper, and focused. So that is it for my violin studio tour. I hope you enjoyed it. As I alluded to in the video, I will be recording and posting edited 3-angle, great quality audio sound video lessons, real recorded lessons of me working with my student onto this channel. So please stick around, subscribe if that's your sort of thing, and enjoy these upcoming very real Suzuki violin lessons taught in my very own studio.